The grand hall fell silent. Not the peaceful kind, the dangerous kind. The kind that comes right before a woman's life gets sold to the highest bidder. Lin Yue stood alone in the center of that room, surrounded by strangers who looked at her like she was already gone. A widow, barren, Chinese, 3 strikes in a world that barely gave you one. They thought they could erase her. They were wrong. This is the story of the woman who refused to disappear, and the man no one saw coming. Stay with me until the end, hit that like button, and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels. The fire in the grand hall wasn't warm enough to touch the cold that lived in people's eyes. Lin Yu felt it the moment she stepped through the doors. That particular kind of silence that wraps around you like a noose. Every head turned. Every conversation died. The musicians kept playing, but the notes sounded hollow now, like they were performing for ghosts. She kept walking anyway. Her dress was simple. Dark blue cotton, clean but worn at the hem. Nothing like the silk gowns that rustled past her, carried by women who wouldn't meet her gaze. She'd spent an hour that morning trying to make herself presentable, knowing it wouldn't matter. Knowing they'd see what they wanted to see, regardless of how carefully she pinned her hair or how straight she held her spine. Foreign. Unwanted. Disposable. The winter of 1883 had teeth in Montana territory, the kind that bit down and didn't let go. Lin Yu had survived worse than cold, though. She'd survived losing everything that mattered and waking up the next morning anyway. She'd survived being told her worth was measured in sons she couldn't produce. She'd survived watching her husband die and knowing his family blamed her for it, as if grief and biology were things she could control. What she hadn't survived was her mother-in-law's final judgment. Useless. The word still burned, not because it was true, but because it was final. Margaret Chen had looked at Lin Yu across the parlor table 3 days ago and delivered the verdict with all the warmth of an executioner reading a sentence. You failed to give my son an heir. You have no value to this family. I've made arrangements. Arrangements. Such a polite word for being sold. Lin Yu had asked what kind of arrangements. Margaret's smile had been thin as paper. There are men willing to take on a woman of your circumstances for the right price. Consider yourself fortunate I'm being this generous. Generous. Another word that meant its opposite when it came from Margaret Chen's mouth. So here Lin Yu stood, in a room full of people who'd already decided she didn't belong, waiting to see which man would claim her like livestock at auction. The thought made her stomach turn, but she kept her face smooth. She'd learned early that showing pain only encouraged people to press harder on the wound. Is that her? The whisper came from somewhere to her left. A woman's voice, pitched just loud enough to be overheard. The Barren one? Yes. I heard Margaret selling her off tonight. To who? Does it matter? Anyone desperate enough to take damaged goods? Lin Yu's jaw tightened. She didn't turn toward the voices, didn't give them the satisfaction, just kept moving forward, one step at a time, toward the far side of the hall where the chairs lined the walls like witnesses at a trial. The settlement's winter gathering was supposed to be a celebration, the first big social event after the holiday season, when the wealthy and powerful came together to see and be seen. Women showed off new dresses. Men made business deals over whiskey and cigars. Young people flirted in corners while their parents pretended not to notice. And occasionally, apparently, widows got auctioned off to settle debts. Lin Yu found an empty chair near the back and sat down carefully, arranging her skirts with hands that wanted to shake but wouldn't. Not here. Not in front of them. Across the room, Margaret Chen held court like a queen. She wore burgundy silk that probably cost more than Lin Yu's entire year of wages when she'd worked at the boarding house. Her gray hair was swept up in an elaborate style that required 3 maids and an hour of work. She laughed at something one of the men said, a real laugh, full of genuine amusement, and Lin Yu felt something twist in her chest. Margaret had never laughed like that around her. Around her daughter-in-law, she'd worn a mask of perpetual disappointment, as if Lin Yu's very existence was a personal insult. Maybe it was. Lin Yu had never quite figured out what she'd done wrong beyond failing to get pregnant. She'd worked hard, kept the house clean, learned to cook American food even though it tasted like cardboard compared to what her own mother used to make. She'd tried to fit in, to make herself smaller and quieter and less noticeably Chinese. It hadn't mattered. When Robert died, sudden, a heart attack at 43, Margaret's grief had curdled into rage. and Lin Yu had been the closest target. "You killed him," Margaret had said at the funeral, her voice low enough that only Lin Yu could hear. "Working him to death trying to support a wife who couldn't even give him children. You bled him dry." It wasn't true. Robert had worked himself to death long before he married Lin Yue, chasing his mother's approval and never quite catching it. But truth didn't matter much when measured against grief and blame. Lin Yue pulled her thoughts back to the present as the music shifted. A waltz now, couples forming up on the dance floor. She watched them spin past in their fine clothes, their faces flushed with wine and warmth. None of them looked at her. She might as well have been a shadow. "There she is!" The new voice was male, pitched low but carrying. Lin Yue didn't have to turn to know people were staring again. She could feel their eyes like brands against her skin. Two men approached Margaret Chen. One was Thomas Garvey, rail-thin, mid-50s, with a reputation for drinking away his ranch money and beating the hired hands when he got angry. The other was someone Lin Yu didn't recognize, younger, maybe 30, with slicked-back hair and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Margaret greeted them both with the same gracious warmth she never showed at home. Lin Yu watched the conversation unfold in gestures and nods. Saw Margaret glance her direction, then back to the men. Saw money change hands, discreet, hidden in a handshake, but unmistakable. Her stomach dropped. This was it. The moment Margaret had orchestrated. Lin Yue was about to become property again, just with a different owner. Thomas Garvey started walking toward her. His gait was unsteady, already drunk probably, and his eyes had that flat, entitled look men got when they thought they'd bought something. Lin Yu stood up. If this was happening, she'd face it on her feet. Garvey stopped in front of her, looking her up and down like she was a horse he was considering. The smell of whiskey rolled off him in waves. "You're smaller than I expected," he said. Not to her, about her, as if she wasn't standing right there. "Margaret said you were healthy, though, strong back, good for work." Good for work, like an ox or a mule. Lin Yu met his eyes and said nothing. Every word she could think of would only make things worse. "You speak English?" Garvey leaned closer. "Or you one of those that just nods and bows?" "I speak English." Her voice came out steady. She was proud of that. "Good. I don't like having to repeat myself." He reached for her arm. "Come on then. We got paperwork to sign." Lin Yue stepped back before he could touch her. The movement was instinctive, born from months of learning to keep distance between herself and people who saw her as less than human. Garvey's face darkened. "Now don't make this difficult." "The lady seems disinclined." The new voice cut through the noise like a blade through silk, deep, rough-edged, with an accent that suggested somewhere south but long ago. The kind of voice that made people stop and pay attention even when they didn't want to. The entire room went quiet. Lin Yu turned toward the voice and felt her breath catch. The man standing 10 feet away shouldn't have been at this gathering. Everything about him was wrong for the careful social order Margaret and her friends worked so hard to maintain. He wore black, not fancy dress black, but working black. Trail dust still visible on his boots. His hair was dark, worn longer than fashion dictated, and his face was all hard angles and old scars. He looked like he'd been carved from the Montana mountains and forgotten to smooth out the rough edges. But it was his eyes that made Lin Yu's heart kick against her ribs. Gray, cold as January, and fixed on Thomas Garvey with the kind of attention a wolf gives a rabbit. "Draven," Garvey's voice had gone tight, "this ain't your concern." Didn't say it was. The man, Draven, moved closer with the easy grace of someone who knew how to handle himself in a fight. "Just making an observation? The paperwork's already signed. Margaret sold her to me fair and square." "That's so." Draven's gaze slid to Margaret, who'd gone pale as milk. "Funny. Didn't realize we were in the business of selling people. Thought we left that particular custom behind a couple decades back." Someone in the crowd sucked in a breath. "You didn't bring up slavery at a Montana Territory social gathering, especially not in a room full of people working hard to pretend they were civilized." Margaret recovered first. "Mr. Draven, how unexpected to see you here. I wasn't aware you attended these functions." "I don't?" He looked at her like she was something he'd scraped off his boot. "Got invited? Figured I'd see what all the fuss was about." "Well, I'm afraid you've arrived at an inopportune moment. We're in the middle of conducting private business. Selling a widow to a drunk to settle your debt seems pretty public to me, Mrs. Chen, seeing as you're doing it in front of half the settlement. The silence that followed was absolute. Lin Yue could hear her own heartbeat, loud and fast in her ears. She could feel every eye in the room on her, on Draven, on the unfolding disaster that this evening had become. Margaret's composure cracked. My family's financial arrangements are none of your concern, Mr. Draven, and I'll thank you not to interfere in matters you don't understand. Oh, I understand plenty. Draven's voice went soft, dangerous. I understand you're treating your daughter-in-law like livestock. I understand Garvey there has a reputation for putting women in the ground before their time. And I understand that if this transaction goes through, that girl's going to be dead inside a year. So yeah, I'm interfering. Thomas Garvey's hand dropped to his hip, where a gun probably sat hidden under his coat. You got no right. I got all the rights I need. Draven didn't move, didn't reach for a weapon of his own. He just stood there, radiating the kind of calm that came before violence. Now here's what's going to happen. You're going to step away from the lady. You're going to go back to your whiskey, and we're all going to pretend this conversation never happened. Like hell. Or, Draven's voice dropped even lower, we can settle this outside. Your choice. Garvey stared at him. Lin Yu watched the calculation happen behind his drunk eyes, weighing his pride against his survival instinct. Everyone in the territory knew who Cold Draven was, what he was. The man didn't start fights, but he sure as hell finished them. After a long moment, Garvey stepped back. This ain't over, Draven. Yeah, it is. Garvey turned and stalked away, shoving through the crowd toward the exit. The room stayed frozen for another beat. Then conversation started up again. Quieter now, urgent and full of speculation. Lin Yu realized she'd been holding her breath. She let it out slowly, trying to make sense of what just happened. Draven turned to face her fully for the first time. Up close, he was taller than she'd realized, 6 feet at least, broad-shouldered and built like someone who'd spent his life doing hard work. The scars on his face were old, faded to white against sun-weathered skin. He looked at her the way most people didn't, directly, like she was a person instead of a problem. You all right? He asked. Lin Yue nodded, not trusting her voice. Good. He glanced at Margaret, who stood rigid with fury. We need to talk. You, me, and Mrs. Chen. Somewhere private. Margaret opened her mouth to protest, but something in Draven's expression made her reconsider. My carriage is outside. Lead the way. They walked through the crowd in silence. Draven first, then Margaret, then Lin Yu, bringing up the rear like a prisoner being escorted. People whispered as they passed. Lin Yu caught fragments. Can't believe. Absolute scandal. Who does he think? The cold outside hit like a fist after the stuffy warmth of the hall. Margaret's carriage waited in the yard, fancy black lacquer with brass fixtures that gleamed in the lamplight. The driver sat up top, bundled in furs, pretending not to listen. Margaret climbed in first. Draven gestured for Lin Yu to follow, then pulled himself up last. The space inside was tight, velvet seats and the smell of expensive perfume. Lin Yu pressed herself into the corner, trying to take up as little room as possible. Margaret spoke first. I don't know what game you're playing, Mr. Draven, but not a game. He settled back against the seat, completely at ease despite the tension crackling in the small space. Here's the situation. You sold your daughter-in-law to settle a debt. I'm offering to clear that debt myself. In exchange, she comes with me. Lin Yu's head snapped up. What? How much did Garvey pay you? Draven asked Margaret, ignoring Lin Yu's reaction. Margaret's jaw worked. $200. Liar. The word was casual, almost friendly. Try again. A long pause. 150. Draven pulled a leather wallet from his coat and counted out bills. Here's 200. That clears the debt plus interest. We done? Margaret stared at the money like it might bite her. And what exactly do you expect in return, Mr. Draven? That's between me and the lady. He looked at Lin Yue. You got a say in this. You want to go back in there, wait for the next buyer. That's your choice. Or you come with me. I'm offering employment. Nothing more, nothing less. You work, you get paid, you got a roof over your head and food in your belly. You want to leave after that, you leave. No strings. Employment. The word sounded too simple for whatever this was. Lin Yu looked between them, Margaret with her fury barely contained, Draven with his strange calm, the money sitting on the velvet seat like an accusation. Her whole life had been about other people making choices for her parents choosing to send her to America, the matchmaker choosing Robert, Margaret choosing to sell her. For once, someone was asking what she wanted. The smart thing would be to ask questions, find out what kind of work, where she'd be living, what the catch was, because there was always a catch. But looking at Draven's scarred face and steady eyes, Lin Yue made a decision based on nothing but instinct. This man had just walked into a room full of people who hated him and defended a woman he didn't know. Whatever his motives were, they couldn't be worse than being property to Thomas Garvey. "I'll come with you," she said. Margaret made a sound like she'd been slapped. "You can't be serious." "She just said it, didn't she?" Draven picked up the money and handed it to Margaret. "Transactions complete. Mrs. Chen, pleasure doing business. Miss—" He paused. "What's your name?" "Your real name, not what they've been calling you." "Lin Yue." "Miss Lin, welcome to the strangest decision you ever made." He pushed open the carriage door and dropped down to the frozen ground. "You coming?" Lin Yu looked at Margaret one last time, saw the anger there, but also something else. Calculation. Margaret was already figuring out how to spin this, how to make herself the victim in the story instead of the villain. Let her. Lin Yue was done caring what these people thought. She climbed out of the carriage into the winter night. The cold bit through her thin dress immediately, but she didn't care. She felt lighter than she had in months, maybe years. Draven started walking toward a horse tied near the gate, a big buckskin gelding that stamped and snorted in the cold. He untied the reins and swung up into the saddle with easy practice, then reached down. "You ever ridden?" "Not really." "Gonna have to learn. Give me your hand." Lin Yue hesitated only a second before taking his hand. His grip was strong, calloused, and he pulled her up behind him like she weighed nothing. The saddle was hard and cold through her dress, and she had no idea where to put her hands. "Hold on to me," Draven said. "We got a ways to go, and I ain't stopping if you fall off." Lin Yue wrapped her arms around his waist, feeling the solid warmth of him through his coat. It was strange, touching a man she didn't know. Strange, but not frightening. Draven radiated a kind of contained power that felt safe rather than threatening. He kicked the horse into motion, and they left the grand hall behind, left Margaret and her fury, left Thomas Garvey and his entitlement, left the whole poisonous social order that had tried to grind Lin Yu down to nothing. The ride took them away from the settlement, out into the vast darkness of the Montana Territory. Snow crunched under the horses' hooves. The sky was clear, stars scattered across the black like spilled salt. Lin Yu's fingers were going numb, but she didn't say anything, just held on and tried to process what she'd done. After an hour, maybe more, buildings appeared in the distance. Not a town, more like a compound. Several structures arranged around a central yard, lights burning in windows against the dark. Draven guided the horse toward what looked like the main house and dismounted, then helped Lin Yu down. Her legs nearly gave out when her feet hit the ground. She'd been clenching her muscles for so long they'd forgotten how to work properly. "Come on," Draven said, leading her toward the house. "Let's get you warmed up before you freeze to death." The inside was Spartan but clean. Wooden floors, simple furniture, a fire burning low in the hearth. It looked like a place where people worked hard and slept hard and didn't waste time on decoration. A woman appeared from a back room, older, 50 maybe, with iron gray hair and sharp eyes. She took one look at Lin Yue and raised her eyebrows at Draven. "Found a stray?" she asked. "Something like that." "May, this is Lin Yue. She'll be staying here. Lin, this is May. She keeps this place running." May's expression softened slightly. "You look half frozen, girl. Come on, let's get you by the fire." She ushered Lin Yue to a chair near the hearth and wrapped a blanket around her shoulders. The warmth felt like a physical shock after so long in the cold. Lin Yu's teeth started chattering. "I'll make tea," May said, disappearing into what must be the kitchen. Draven remained standing, watching Lin Yu with that same direct gaze. "You got questions? Ask them." Lin Yu's mind was full of questions, tumbling over each other. She picked the most important one. "Why did you do that? You don't know me." "Don't have to know you to recognize when something's wrong." He leaned against the wall, arms crossed. That scene back there, selling you off like that. It was wrong. I got the means to stop it, so I did. And now what? What do you want from me? Told you already? Employment. I run a ranch, cattle, horses, some farming. Always need extra hands, especially ones willing to work hard. You cook? Yes. Good. May could use help in the kitchen. You know anything about animals? Not really. You'll learn. He pushed off the wall. Here's how it works. You work, you get room and board plus wages. 50 cents a day to start. You don't like it here, you can leave anytime. I ain't keeping prisoners. 50 cents a day. It wasn't much, but it was more than she'd had at Margaret's house, where she'd worked for free as a daughter-in-law. There has to be more to it, Lin Yue said. People don't do things for nothing. Draven's mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but close. You're right to be suspicious. World's full of men who do favors expecting something in return. But here's the truth. I'm offering this because I can, and because watching Garvey put his hands on you made me want to put him in the ground. That simple enough? It should have sounded too good to be true. Maybe it was. But sitting in this warm room with this strange man who'd just upended her entire life, Lin Yu felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. I'll stay, she said. At least for now. See how it goes. Fair enough? Draven straightened. May'll show you to a room. Get some rest. Work starts early around here. He left before Lin Yu could say anything else, his boots heavy on the wooden floor. May returned with tea. Real tea, not the weak stuff Margaret served, and a plate of bread and cheese. Eat, she commanded. You're too thin. Lin Yue ate. The food was simple but good, and her stomach reminded her she hadn't eaten since morning. May watched her with the kind of assessment that came from years of reading people. Cole's a good man, she said finally. Rough around the edges, and he's got a past that'd make your hair curl. But he's fair, treats people decent long as they do the same back. You'll be safe here. Safe. Another word that sounded too simple to be true. But as Lin Yu finished her tea and followed May up the stairs to a small, clean room with an actual bed, not a pallet on the floor, not a corner of someone else's space, but a real bed with blankets and a pillow, she let herself believe it might be possible. She'd escaped. Against all odds, she'd walked away from Margaret's plans and Thomas Garvey's intentions and the whole cruel machine that had tried to grind her down. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. She knew that. Nothing was ever as simple as it seemed. But tonight, in this room that smelled like pine and clean linen, Lin Yu let herself feel something close to free. She lay down on the bed without even undressing, too tired to do more than pull the blankets up. Through the window, she could see stars. The same stars that had watched her cross an ocean, bury a husband, survive a mother-in-law's hatred. The same stars that had watched her make the most dangerous choice of her life. Outside, a coyote howled. The sound should have been lonely, but somehow it wasn't. It sounded like a challenge thrown at the darkness, a refusal to be silent. Lin Yui closed her eyes and thought about tomorrow, about work and strangers and learning to survive in a new place with new rules, about the man with gray eyes and old scars who'd stepped between her and disaster for no reason she could understand, about the future she'd just claimed for herself, uncertain and frightening and entirely her own. For the first time in longer than she could remember, she fell asleep without crying. Dawn came too early and too bright. Lin Yue woke to light streaming through unfamiliar windows and the sound of men's voices outside, rough and practical, discussing horses and fence lines and 100 other things she didn't understand yet. For a disoriented moment, she didn't know where she was. Then memory crashed back. The grand hall, Margaret's fury, Draven's scarred face and steady hands pulling her up onto that horse. The long cold ride into darkness, and this room, this bed, this strange new reality she'd traded her old life for. She sat up slowly, her body stiff from sleeping in her dress. The room was small but well made, with real glass in the windows and a rug on the floor that looked hand-woven. Someone had left a pitcher of water and a basin on the dresser, steam still rising from the surface. Fresh water, heated. When was the last time anyone had done something like that for her? A knock at the door made her jump. "You decent?" May's voice, gruff but not unkind. "Yes." The door opened and May stepped in carrying an armload of fabric. Brought you some clothes. Can't work in that dress you got on. You'll freeze and tear it to pieces inside a day. These were mine when I was younger. Might be a bit big, but they'll do until we can get you something proper. She dropped the clothes on the bed. Wool pants, thick cotton shirts, a heavy coat that smelled like cedar. Working clothes. Men's clothes mostly, but altered for a woman's frame.
Lin Yu touched the fabric, feeling the quality of it. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. You're about to earn every stitch. May crossed her arms. Cole says you're willing to work. That true, or were you just saying what he wanted to hear? It's true. Good, because we don't carry dead weight around here. Everyone pulls their share from Cole on down. You got a problem with that? No. Lin Yue met May's eyes. I've worked my whole life. I'm not afraid of it.
Something in May's expression shifted. Not quite approval, but close. Get dressed and come downstairs. Breakfast is in 10 minutes, and we don't hold it for stragglers. She left before Lin Yue could respond. Lin Yue changed quickly, her fingers clumsy with the unfamiliar buttons and laces. The pants felt strange after years of skirts, but they were warm and sturdy. The shirt was too big in the shoulders, but it didn't matter. These were clothes meant for doing things, not for being looked at. She found her way downstairs following the smell of coffee and frying bacon. The kitchen was bigger than she'd expected, with a long table that could seat a dozen people. 5 men already sat there, shoveling food into their mouths like they were fueling up for battle. They looked up when she entered, conversation dying mid-sentence. Boys, this is Lin Yue, May said from the stove, not turning around. She's helping in the kitchen starting today. You got a problem with that, take it up with Cole. The men exchanged glances. One of them, young, maybe 20, with red hair and freckles, spoke up. No problem, ma'am. Good. Eat your breakfast and get to work. Lin Yu took a seat at the end of the table, trying to make herself small. May brought over a plate piled with eggs, bacon, and biscuits that steamed in the cold morning air. It was more food than Lin Yu usually ate in a day. Eat, May commanded. You're too skinny, and the work won't wait for you to build strength. Lin Yu ate. The food was plain but good, cooked by someone who knew what they were doing. The men finished quickly and filed out, nodding to May as they passed. The red-haired one paused by Lin Yu's chair. Name's Danny, he said. Welcome to Draven's outfit. Thank you. He grinned and followed the others out into the morning. Lin Yu heard their voices fade as they headed toward the barns. May sat down across from her with her own plate and coffee. Danny's a good kid. The others too, mostly. They'll give you trouble at first, testing you, seeing if you break easy. Don't let them push you around. I won't. And if any of them get handsy, you tell me or Cole. We don't tolerate that here. Lin Yue nodded, not quite believing it. Every place she'd ever worked, someone had gotten handsy eventually. Men thought they could touch you if you were foreign, if you were poor, if you were anything less than protected by someone more powerful than them. I mean it, May said, reading her skepticism. Cole shot a man 2 years back for putting his hands on one of the kitchen girls. Didn't kill him, but he ain't walked right since. Word got around after that. The matter-of-fact way she said it made Lin Yu's stomach flip. This was still the West, where violence solved problems faster than law ever could. Now then, May pushed her empty plate aside. You said you can cook. Show me. The morning passed in a blur of work. May put Lin Yu through her paces, testing her knife skills, her knowledge of ingredients, her ability to work fast under pressure. It was different from cooking for Margaret, where everything had to be fancy and French and completely divorced from flavor. May wanted food that stuck to your ribs and tasted like something. Lin Yu found herself relaxing into the rhythm of it, her hands remembering skills she'd learned from her mother a lifetime ago. You'll do, May said finally, when the lunch preparations were well underway. Better than I expected, truth be told. You got training? My mother taught me, before I came to America. She teach you Chinese cooking? Lin Yue hesitated. Margaret had forbidden her from making anything that smelled foreign, anything that reminded people she wasn't from here. Yes. Good. These boys eat the same 5 things week after week. About time someone showed them there's more to food than beef and potatoes. May wiped her hands on her apron. Cole's coming in for lunch. Fair warning. He don't talk much during meals. Thinks it interferes with digestion or some such nonsense. Cole Draven arrived exactly at noon, his timing precise as clockwork. He'd shed his coat but still wore the same black clothes from last night, now dusty from morning work. He nodded to May, then to Lin Yue, and sat down at the head of the table without ceremony. May served the meal. Roast chicken, vegetables, fresh bread. Cole ate methodically, his attention on his plate. Lin Yue picked at her own food, hyper-aware of his presence across the table. In daylight, he looked older than she'd thought. 40, maybe. The scars on his face were more visible now, old knife wounds, and one that looked like it might have come from barbed wire. "Food's good," he said finally, looking at May. "Don't thank me, thank Lin. She made most of it." Cole's gray eyes shifted to Lin Yue. "You're settling in all right?" "Yes. Thank you." "May treating you fair?" "She's been very kind." "Kind?" May snorted. "I've been working you like a borrowed mule, but you kept up, so I guess that counts for something." The corner of Cole's mouth twitched. High praise from May. She ran off the last 3 kitchen helpers inside a week. "They were lazy," May said. "This one's got spine. I can work with that." Cole finished his meal and stood. "Lin, walk with me. Want to show you around the place." It wasn't a request. Lin Yue wiped her hands and followed him outside, where the afternoon sun did nothing to warm the bitter cold. The compound looked different in daylight, more organized than she'd realized. The main house sat in the center, surrounded by barns, bunkhouses, storage sheds, and what looked like a smithy. Beyond that, pastures stretched toward distant mountains, dotted with cattle that looked like dark spots against the snow. "We run about 500 head, Cole said, walking toward the nearest barn. "Mostly Herefords, some Longhorns for breeding. We sell beef to the mining camps and the railroad crews. Good money, but hard work. Weather turns on you out here faster than anywhere else I've been." Lin Yue followed, trying to keep up with his long strides. "Where are you from?" "Originally?" "Texas. Long time ago." He didn't elaborate. "You know how to ride yet?" "No." "You'll learn. Can't get around the ranch on foot. It's too big. I'll have Danny teach you." He pushed open the barn door and gestured her inside. "This is where we keep the working horses. The breeding stock's in the other barn." The smell hit her first, hay and leather and horse sweat, earthy and alive. A dozen horses stood in their stalls, some eating, some dozing. They were beautiful animals, well cared for and healthy. "You scared of them?" Cole asked, watching her face. "A little." "Good. Means you got sense. Horses are bigger and stronger than you. They can kill you if they want to, or just by accident if you're stupid around them. But if you treat them right, they'll work themselves to death for you." He walked to one of the stalls and scratched a mare's nose. "This is Rosie. She's old and patient. Good for learning." Lin Yue approached carefully. Rosie was enormous up close, her dark eyes liquid and intelligent. The mare snuffled at Lin Yue's hand, looking for treats. "Don't got nothing for you, girl," Cole said. "Later." He turned back to Lin Yue. "Danny'll start teaching you this week. Just basics at first. How to saddle up, how to sit proper, how to not fall off and break your neck." "Why?" The question came out before Lin Yue could stop it. "Why teach me all this? I'm just kitchen help." Cole was quiet for a moment, stroking Rosie's neck. "You think that's all you are?" "That's what you hired me for. I hired you because you needed a way out, and I happened to be there. What you make of it after that is up to you." He looked at her directly. "You want to spend the rest of your life cooking for ranch hands? That's fine. Honest work. But if you want to learn other things, riding, ranching, how to handle yourself out here, I ain't gonna stop you. World's full of people telling women what they can't do. Figure you heard enough of that already." Lin Yu's throat tightened. She didn't trust herself to speak. "Come on," Cole said. "Still got more to show you." They walked the compound for another hour. Cole pointed out the important buildings. The bunkhouse where the hands slept, the storehouse where they kept supplies, the workshop where they fixed equipment. He introduced her to a few more of the men, who nodded politely but didn't quite meet her eyes. She was still foreign to them, still other, but at least they weren't actively hostile. "They'll come around," Cole said, reading her expression. "Or they won't. Either way, they'll treat you decent or they'll find work somewhere else." "You'd fire them over me?" "I'd fire them for being disrespectful. Don't matter who they're disrespecting." He stopped at the edge of the yard, looking out over the pastures. "You need to understand something, Lin. What happened last night at that gathering? It's going to cause talk. Lots of it. People in town already didn't like me much. Now I gone and stepped in their business, took you away from Margaret's plans. They're going to say things, make assumptions. What kind of assumptions? The kind men always make when they see a woman living at another man's place. He glanced at her. I'm telling you now, straight. There ain't nothing like that happening here. You work for me, same as May, same as the hands. Anyone suggests otherwise, you send them to me and I'll correct their thinking.
Lin Yu believed him. She didn't know why, exactly. Maybe it was the way he looked at her, direct and businesslike, no hidden hunger in his eyes. Maybe it was the fact that he'd given her her own room with a lock on the door. Or maybe she was just desperate enough to believe because the alternative was going back. Okay, she said. Okay. He started walking back toward the house. One more thing. Tomorrow's Sunday. May goes to church in town, takes the wagon. You want to go with her? You can. I don't, but I won't stop you if you're inclined. Church, where Margaret would be, where all those people from the gathering would stare and whisper and judge. I'll stay here, Lin Yu said. Cole nodded like he'd expected that answer. Suit yourself. Just wanted you to know you got the choice. That night, Lin Yu lay in her bed and listened to the unfamiliar sounds of the ranch settling down for sleep. Horses nickering in the barns, men's voices drifting from the bunkhouse, the wind rattling the windows. It was different from town, where you could always hear other people, other lives pressing up against yours. Here, there was space, room to breathe. She thought about what Cole had said, about making something of this, about learning, about choice. Her whole life had been about other people's choices, her parents choosing to send her away, Robert choosing to marry her because he needed a wife and she was available, Margaret choosing to sell her when she became inconvenient. For the first time, someone was telling her the choice was hers. It was terrifying. The week that followed established a rhythm. Lin Yu woke before dawn, worked in the kitchen with May until lunch, then spent afternoons learning whatever task May or Cole set for her. She learned to chop wood without hitting her own feet, learned to mend clothes and harnesses, learned the names of all the hands and which ones would help if she asked, and which ones she should avoid. Danny started teaching her to ride on Wednesday. True to Cole's word, he put her on Rosie and let her get used to sitting in the saddle before they even talked about moving. Lin Yu's muscles screamed in protest, riding used parts of your body that normal work didn't touch. But she gritted her teeth and kept at it. You're doing good, Danny said, walking beside Rosie as they circled the corral. Most folks fall off at least once their first week. You ain't fallen yet. Give me time, Lin Yu muttered, gripping the saddle horn like her life depended on it. Danny laughed. Fair enough, but seriously, you got decent balance. Once you relax a bit, it'll come easier. Relax, right. Sitting on top of a 1,000-pound animal that could decide at any moment to throw her off. Very relaxing. But slowly, imperceptibly, it did get easier. By Friday, she could walk Rosie around the corral without feeling like she was about to die. By Saturday, Danny had her trotting, and though she bounced in the saddle like a sack of potatoes, she stayed on. Hot damn, Danny said, grinning. You're a natural. I'm not anything close to natural. You're still alive and still on the horse. Out here, that counts as natural. He helped her dismount. We'll work on it more next week. Pretty soon you'll be riding out with the rest of us. Lin Yu's legs wobbled when her feet hit the ground. I don't think I'm ready for that. Nobody's ready until they do it. That's how everything works around here. She was still thinking about that when she walked back to the house and found May packing supplies into crates. Good, you're here, May said. Help me load these. We're taking them to town tomorrow. Lin Yu's stomach dropped. I thought you went to church on Sundays. I do. This year the church is organizing a winter charity drive, collecting food and clothes for families that need help. Cole donates every year. Figure you can come help me deliver it. I don't think... Wasn't asking. May fixed her with a look. You can't hide out here forever, girl. Sooner or later you got to face those people again. Might as well be on your terms, doing something good. They hate me. They hate lots of things. Don't mean you got to care about it. May handed her a crate. Load this in the wagon. We leave at 8. That night, Lin Yu barely slept. The thought of going back to town, seeing Margaret, seeing all those faces that had watched her being sold like cattle, it made her want to crawl under the bed and never come out.
But when morning came, she got dressed and climbed into the wagon beside May without complaint. If she was going to survive out here, she needed to stop being afraid of people who'd already done their worst to her. The ride to town took an hour. May drove the wagon with the same competent efficiency she brought to everything else, the two draft horses pulling steady despite the weight of supplies. They didn't talk much. Lin Yue was grateful for that. The church sat on the edge of town, white-painted wood with a small steeple and neat rows of graves behind it. People were already gathering when May pulled up, families in their Sunday clothes, looking scrubbed and respectable. Conversations died when they saw Lin Yue. "Ignore them," May said quietly. "Help me unload." They carried crates into the church basement, where several women were organizing donations. One of them was Margaret. Margaret's face went rigid when she saw Lin Yue. "What is she doing here?" "Helping," May said flatly. "Same as everyone else. You got a problem with that. Take it up with Pastor Williams." "This is a church function, May. We can't have what? Someone doing honest work?" May set down her crate with a thud. "Lynn's here to help. She ain't hurting nobody. So unless you want to explain to the whole congregation why you're turning away willing hands, I suggest you get out of the way." Margaret's mouth worked, but no sound came out. After a moment, she turned and walked away, her spine stiff with rage. Lin Yue let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. "Like I said," May muttered, "ignore them." They worked for 2 hours, unloading supplies and organizing them into packages for distribution. Some of the women ignored Lin Yue completely, others shot her hostile looks but didn't say anything. A few, not many, but a few, nodded politely or even said thank you when she handed them something. It wasn't acceptance, but it was something. When the work was done, May found Lin Yue outside by the wagon. "You all right?" "I will be." "Good, because we're coming back next month. This charity drive runs through winter." May climbed up into the driver's seat. "You can hide or you can stand up. Your choice. But I'll tell you right now which one's going to serve you better in the long run." On the ride home, Lin Yue thought about choices again. About the difference between hiding and protecting yourself. About the line between caution and cowardice. She was still thinking about it when they got back to the ranch and found Cole waiting in the yard, his expression grim. "We got a problem," he said. May pulled the wagon to a stop. "What kind of problem?" "The kind that involves Thomas Garvey and a dozen of his friends riding up here this morning making noise about unfinished business." Cole's jaw was tight. "They're coming back tomorrow. Said they want to talk." Lin Yu's blood went cold. "About me?" "About a lot of things, probably. But yeah, you're part of it." Cole looked at her directly. "I want you to understand something. They come here making threats. They're going to get more than talk. But I need to know where you stand. You want to go back with them. End this peacefully. That's your choice. I won't stop you." "You just let them take me?" "I'd let you choose. Big difference." Lin Yu thought about Thomas Garvey's drunk eyes and grabbing hands. Thought about being property again, owned and used until she broke. Thought about the week she'd just lived, hard work and sore muscles, and small kindnesses from May and Danny, and even cold, scarred Cole who offered choices instead of commands. "I'm staying," she said. "Whatever that means." "I'm staying." Cole's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes shifted. "All right then, May, get Lin inside. Tomorrow's going to be interesting." That night, Lin Yu couldn't sleep. She lay in her bed listening to the sounds of the ranch and thinking about violence, about men who took what they wanted because they could, about all the ways this could go wrong. Sometime after midnight, she heard footsteps in the hallway. A soft knock on her door. "It's May." Lin Yu opened the door. May stood there in her nightgown, holding something wrapped in cloth. "Can't sleep either," May said. "Figured you might want some company." She came in and sat on the edge of Lin Yu's bed, unwrapping the cloth to reveal a small pistol. "Cole wants you to have this," May said. "Just in case things go sideways tomorrow. You know how to shoot?" Lin Yu shook her head. "I'll teach you basics in the morning. Point, squeeze, don't close your eyes." May set the gun on the bedside table. "Probably won't need it. Cole's dealt with men like Garvey before, but better to have it and not need it than the other way around." "May." Lin Yu's voice came out smaller than she intended. "Why are you doing this? You and Cole both. You don't know me. You don't owe me anything. May was quiet for a long moment. You ever wonder why I'm out here? Woman my age, working on a ranch instead of keeping house in town. I figured you liked the work. I do, but that ain't why I'm here. May's hands folded in her lap. 20 years ago, I was married. Had a husband who liked to use his fists when he drank, which was often. One night he went too far and I fought back. Cracked his skull with a fireplace poker. Didn't kill him, but close enough. Lin Yue went still. Law would have hung me if they could have proved it. But there wasn't proof, just him saying I attacked him for no reason and me saying it was self-defense. Judge ruled in his favor, said a wife don't have the right to defend herself against her husband's discipline. May's voice was flat, matter of fact. I ran, ended up here, half dead from exposure. Cole found me, brought me in, gave me work, never asked questions, never judged, just let me build a new life. I didn't know. Why would you? Point is, I know what it's like when the world decides you're less than human. When people who are supposed to protect you are the ones you need protecting from. May looked at her. Cole knows it too, though his story's different than mine. That's why we do this. Why we take in strays and give them a fighting chance. Because somebody's got to. She stood up, wrapping the cloth back around the pistol's holster. Get some rest. Tomorrow we show Garvey and his friends that some things ain't for sale. After May left, Lin Yu picked up the pistol. It was heavier than she expected, cold and solid in her hands. A tool designed for one purpose, to hurt people who were trying to hurt you. She hoped she wouldn't need to use it, but she was glad to have it anyway. Morning came with the kind of cold that made your lungs ache. Lin Yu stood at her window watching the sun climb over the mountains, turning the snow from gray to gold. Beautiful, if you ignored what the day might bring. She'd managed maybe 2 hours of sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Thomas Garvey's face, heard Margaret's voice saying useless, felt the weight of being sold like you were nothing. The pistol sat on her nightstand where May had left it, dark metal catching the early light. Downstairs, she found the kitchen already alive with activity. May was frying eggs and bacon for what looked like an army. Danny sat at the table cleaning a rifle, his usual easy smile replaced by something harder. 2 other ranch hands Lin Yue recognized, Frank and Miguel, were doing the same with their own weapons. Morning, May said, not looking up from the stove. Eat something. Don't know when we'll get another chance. Lin Yu sat down with a plate she didn't want. The food tasted like cardboard, but she forced herself to swallow anyway. May was right. You didn't face trouble on an empty stomach. Cole came in through the back door, snowmelt dripping from his boots. He'd been up even earlier than the rest of them, probably checking the perimeter, making sure Garvey hadn't decided to arrive before dawn. They're coming, he said, pouring himself coffee. Spotted dust on the road about 3 miles out, 12 riders, like I figured. Be here inside half an hour. 12. Frank looked up from his rifle. That's more than last time. Garvey's trying to make a point. Cole drank his coffee standing up, his eyes distant. Wants us to know he brought friends. Wants us scared. Is it working? Danny asked. Cole's mouth twitched. What do you think? I think Garvey's an idiot if he believes numbers mean anything when you're involved. Don't get cocky. Numbers mean plenty if you're stupid about using them. Cole set down his cup. Here's how this goes. They ride up, we meet them in the yard, polite but firm. They want to talk, we talk. They want trouble, we give it to them. But nobody shoots first unless I say so. Clear? The men nodded. Lin Yu's hands were shaking, so she put them in her lap where nobody could see. Cole noticed anyway. Lin, you stay inside with May. Door locked. They ask about you, I'll handle it. They're coming because of me. I should be out there. No. The word was flat, final. This is about more than you now. Garvey's using you as an excuse to test boundaries, see if he can push me around. I don't need you in the middle of it. Cole's right, May said, sliding eggs onto plates. Men like Garvey. They're looking for weakness. You walk out there, he'll use you to get leverage. Better you stay hidden. Let Cole handle the talking. Lin Yu wanted to argue but couldn't find the words. Part of her was relieved. She didn't want to face Garvey again, didn't want to see his drunk eyes and know he still thought he owned her. But another part felt like a coward for hiding while other people fought her battles. I don't like this, she said quietly. Don't have to like it. Cole headed toward the door. Just have to survive it. He left with the 3 ranch hands trailing behind. May locked the door after them and moved to the window, watching. Lin Yu joined her, unable to stay away even though her stomach was twisted in knots. The riders appeared right on schedule. 12 men on horseback, Thomas Garvey in the lead, looking slightly less drunk than the last time Lin Yu had seen him, but no less mean. They rode into the yard like they owned it, spreading out in a loose semicircle that was probably supposed to look intimidating. Cole stood in the center of the yard with Danny, Frank, and Miguel flanking him. 4 men against 12. The math was bad, but Cole didn't look worried. He looked patient, like a man waiting for children to finish throwing a tantrum. Draven, Garvey reined in his horse 10 feet away. Glad you're home. We need to have a conversation. So talk. Cole's voice carried clearly through the cold air. Prefer to do it private, man to man. You brought 11 friends to a private conversation? Garvey's jaw tightened. Brought them for insurance. You got a reputation for being unreasonable. Funny. I was about to say the same about you. Cole crossed his arms. You got 30 seconds to state your business before I decide you're trespassing. My business is simple. You took something that belongs to me. I want it back. I didn't take anything. I made a business transaction with Mrs. Chen, paid more than you did, as I recall. That ain't how it works, and you know it. There was an agreement between you and a woman selling another woman like property. Yeah, I know all about your agreement. Don't make it legal, don't make it right, and sure as hell don't make it binding on me. One of Garvey's men, a tall fellow with a scar running down his cheek, leaned forward in his saddle. You calling Mr. Garvey a liar? I'm calling him a drunk who thinks he can buy people. If that makes him a liar too, well, that's just bonus. Cole's voice stayed level, almost bored. Now, unless you got actual business to discuss, I suggest you ride back to town before my coffee gets cold. We ain't leaving without the Chinaman. The slur hit Lin Yu like a physical blow. She saw May's hands tighten on the windowsill. Cole's expression didn't change, but something in his posture shifted, became more dangerous. Her name is Lin Yue, and she ain't going anywhere. You can't keep her here against her will. Against her will? Cole let out a short, harsh laugh. That's rich coming from you. Tell me, Garvey, when you were negotiating to buy her, did you ask what she wanted? Did it occur to you she might have preferences about who owns her? She's a woman and a foreigner. She don't get preferences. See, that's where you and I disagree. Cole took a step forward. His men stayed where they were, but their hands drifted toward their weapons. Way I see it, every person gets to choose their own path. Man, woman, don't matter what color they are or where they come from. You tried to take that choice away from Lynn. I gave it back. Simple as that. Gave it back. Garvey spat into the snow. You got her locked up in there right now. That ain't giving her choice, that's keeping her prisoner. You want to ask her yourself? I'll bring her out here. You can hear it straight from her mouth. Of course, if she says she wants to stay, you ride away and don't come back. Deal? Garvey hesitated. Lin Yue could see him working through the angles, trying to figure out if this was a trap. Before he could answer, May unlocked the door and pushed it open. Lin, get out here. May, he wants proof. We'll give him proof. Come on. Lin Yu's legs felt like water, but she walked out anyway, May right behind her. The cold hit her face like a slap. 12 pairs of eyes turned toward her, and she wanted to run back inside, lock herself in her room, disappear. But she kept walking until she stood beside Cole. Close enough to feel the heat coming off him, close enough that if things went bad, she could grab his arm and hold on. There she is, Cole said. Ask her. Garvey stared at Lin Yu with undisguised contempt. You want to be here? Working for this man? Lin Yu's throat was dry. She forced herself to meet his eyes. Yes. Yes, what? Yes, I want to be here. I choose to stay. Choice. Garvey said it like a curse. You don't know what's good for you. Margaret had plans, proper plans for taking care of you. Margaret wanted to sell me to you for $150. Lin Yu's voice came out stronger now, anger burning through the fear. That's not taking care of someone. That's disposing of them. You ungrateful little... Careful. Cole's voice dropped to something deadly quiet. Real careful how you finish that sentence. Garvey pulled his horse back a step. The animal sensed the tension and tossed its head nervously. This ain't over, Draven. People in town, they're talking, saying you got no right keeping her here, saying maybe the law should get involved. Then bring the law. I'll explain to the sheriff exactly how Mrs. Chen tried to sell a person to settle a debt. Let's see how that conversation goes. The sheriff ain't going to side with you over a Chinaman. Her name, Cole said again, with infinite patience, is Lin Yue. And yeah, maybe the sheriff won't care, but the territorial judge might. Especially when I explain how Margaret Chen violated about 6 different laws trying to traffic her daughter-in-law. You want to roll those dice? Go ahead, but I promise you it won't end the way you're hoping. The standoff stretched out. Lin Yue could hear her own heartbeat, loud in her ears. Could feel May standing solid behind her, Frank and Miguel and Danny ready to move if things went bad. Finally, Garvey yanked his horse's reins hard enough to make it rear. This ain't finished. Yeah, it is. Cole didn't move. You come back here again without a legal reason, I'll consider it hostile action. And I respond to hostile action the same way I always have, with permanent solutions. It was a threat delivered with the casual certainty of a man who'd followed through on threats before. Garvey knew it. His men knew it. They exchanged glances and started backing their horses away. You made a mistake, Draven, Garvey called out as they turned to leave. Protecting her. People are going to remember. Let them. The 12 riders wheeled and headed back down the road, kicking up snow and leaving tracks like scars across the white landscape. Cole watched until they disappeared over the ridge, then let out a long breath. Well, he said, that went better than expected. Better? Danny's voice cracked slightly. Boss, they threatened to bring the law. They threatened a lot of things. Don't mean they'll do any of it. Cole looked at Lin Yue. You all right? She nodded, not trusting her voice. Good. Get back inside before you freeze. May, make sure she drinks something warm. The rest of you back to work. We got cattle to feed and fences to check. The men dispersed, the tension draining out of the yard as quickly as it had built up. Lin Yue stood there for another moment, watching Cole walk toward the barn like nothing unusual had just happened. Like he hadn't just faced down 12 armed men over someone he barely knew. Come on, May said gently. Inside. The kitchen felt too warm after the cold outside. Lin Yue sat at the table while May made tea, her hands wrapped around the cup for warmth, even though she couldn't feel cold anymore. She felt numb, disconnected. You did good out there, May said, sitting down across from her. Standing up to Garvey. That took guts. I was terrified. Being brave don't mean not being scared, means doing it anyway. May sipped her own tea. But this ain't over. Garvey's right about one thing. People are going to talk. You need to be ready for that. I know. Do you? May's gaze was sharp. Because it's going to get worse before it gets better. Right now, you're the foreign widow who got rescued by Cole Draven. That's scandalous enough. But if you keep staying here, keep working beside us, people are going to assume things. Ugly things. Cole said he'd correct their thinking. Cole can say whatever he wants. Won't stop people from believing what they want to believe. May leaned forward. I need you to understand what you signed up for. Living here, working here. It's going to cost you. Your reputation, whatever's left of it. You're standing in town. Any hope of marrying someone respectable down the line. You sure that's a price you're willing to pay? Lin Yue thought about Robert, about the marriage that was supposed to give her security, and instead gave her nothing but grief. Thought about Margaret's house where she'd worked herself to exhaustion, trying to earn approval that never came. Thought about Thomas Garvey's hands reaching for her, claiming her like property. I don't want to marry someone respectable, she said. I don't want to live in town or go to church socials or pretend to be something I'm not. I just want to work and earn my keep and be left alone. You think Cole's going to leave you alone? The question surprised her. What do you mean? May's expression softened. He's a good man, better than most, but he's still a man, and you're living under his roof. Sooner or later, that's going to mean something, whether either of you plan for it or not. He said there was nothing like that. I know what he said, and he meant it, same way a man means it when he says he won't drink again or won't lose his temper. Intentions are one thing. What actually happens is another. May stood up. I ain't saying this to scare you. Just want you going in with eyes open. You and Cole, you're dancing around something neither of you are ready to name yet. But it's there. And eventually you're both going to have to deal with it. She left before Lin Yue could respond. left her sitting at the table with her tea going cold, thinking about things she didn't want to think about. The days that followed fell into an uneasy rhythm. Lin Yue worked harder than ever, in the kitchen, in the stables, anywhere May or Cole needed an extra set of hands. She learned to shoot the pistol May had given her, learned to hit targets from 20 paces, learned to reload without fumbling. She got better at riding, graduated from walking Rosie around the corral to trotting out into the pastures with Danny to check on cattle. The work was exhausting, but good. It left her too tired to think about Garvey's threat, or Margaret's hatred, or May's warning about Cole and dancing around something unnamed. But the work didn't stop the nightmares. They started 3 nights after Garvey's visit. Lin Yue would fall asleep and find herself back in the house she'd shared with Robert, pregnant again, feeling the baby move inside her. Then Robert's mother would appear, her face twisted with disgust, saying the baby was cursed, saying Lin Yue had brought shame on the family. And Lin Yue would wake up alone in her room, gasping, her hand pressed to her flat stomach where nothing lived anymore. She didn't tell anyone, just pushed through the days and tried not to fall asleep at night. May noticed the dark circles under her eyes, but didn't say anything. Cole noticed too, but kept his distance, giving her space to work through whatever she was working through. 2 weeks after Garvey's visit, Margaret made her move. Lin Yue was in town with May, delivering supplies for the church's charity drive again. They'd just finished unloading when a carriage pulled up. Margaret's carriage, brass fixtures gleaming in the winter sun. Margaret climbed out like she owned the street. Behind her came a man Lin Yue didn't recognize, older, maybe 60, with the kind of expensive clothes that marked him as someone important. "May," Margaret said, her voice ice-cold polite. "And my former daughter-in-law. How convenient." May's hand found Lin Yu's arm, holding her in place. "Mrs. Chen, didn't expect to see you here." "I'm sure you didn't." Margaret gestured to the man beside her. "This is Judge Harrison. He's been hearing some concerning reports about Mr. Draven's ranch." The judge looked tired, like he'd been dragged into this against his will. "Mrs. Chen has made allegations that a young woman is being held against her will at the Draven property. As a territorial judge, I'm obligated to investigate." "Held against her will?" May's voice was pure disbelief. "That's rich. Lynn's a free woman working for wages. Nobody's holding her anywhere." "Then she won't mind answering some questions." The judge looked at Lin Yue. "Miss, are you being coerced into staying at Mr. Draven's ranch?" "No." "Has Mr. Draven or anyone in his employ threatened you or forced you to work without compensation?" "No, they've treated me better than—" Lin Yue stopped herself before saying, "better than Margaret ever did." The judge didn't need to hear that. "They've treated me fairly." Margaret stepped forward. "Your Honor, this woman has been manipulated by Mr. Draven. He took advantage of her vulnerable state to lure her away from proper arrangements." "Proper arrangements?" May's voice cut through Margaret's speech. "You mean selling her to Thomas Garvey like livestock? That kind of proper?" The judge's expression shifted. "Is that true, Mrs. Chen? I was helping Lin Yue find appropriate employment by auctioning her off at a social gathering." May wasn't backing down. "Funny definition of help." "That's a gross mischaracterization." "Then how would you characterize it?" The judge sounded genuinely curious now. "Because from where I'm standing, it sounds like you facilitated the sale of a person, which, as I'm sure you're aware, is illegal in Montana territory." Margaret went pale. "I did no such thing. I simply arranged for Lin Yue to enter into employment with Mr. Garvey, who was willing to provide room and board in exchange for domestic services. For $150, Lin Yue said quietly, paid to you, not to me." The judge looked at Margaret for a long moment. "Mrs. Chen, I suggest you consult with a lawyer before making any further statements. As for you, miss," he turned to Lin Yue, "you're free to go where you please. If you want to stay at the Draven Ranch, that's your right. If you want to leave, that's also your right. But nobody, not Mrs. Chen, not Mr. Draven, not anyone can force you either way. Understood?" "Yes, sir." "Good." He tipped his hat. "Ladies, Mrs. Chen, we'll be in touch." He walked away, leaving Margaret standing on the street looking like she'd been slapped. Her fury was a physical thing, radiating off her in waves. "You've made a terrible mistake," she hissed at Lin Yue, "aligning yourself with that man, with those people. You'll regret it." "I already regret plenty," Lin Yue said. But leaving your house ain't one of them. May pulled her away before Margaret could respond. They climbed into the wagon and headed back toward the ranch in silence. Lin Yu's hands were shaking again. She pressed them against her thighs and tried to breathe. That went well, May said finally. She's going to keep coming after me. Probably. Margaret Chen don't let go of grudges easy, but she also just got warned off by a territorial judge, so maybe she'll think twice before trying anything else. May glanced at her. You did good back there. Standing up to her, telling the truth. Didn't feel good. Never does. But necessary and good ain't always the same thing. When they got back to the ranch, Cole was waiting in the yard. One look at their faces told him something had happened. Talk, he said. May filled him in while Lin Yu stood silent, watching Cole's expression go from neutral to granite hard. When May finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Judge Harrison's a fair man, he said finally. If he told Margaret to back off, she'll back off. At least legally, but that don't mean she's done. I know, Lin Yu said. You scared? The question was direct. No softness to it. Lin Yu considered lying, then decided against it. Yes. Good. Fear keeps you smart. Just don't let it keep you paralyzed. He looked at May. Double the watch rotation tonight. If Margaret's desperate enough to bring a judge, she might be desperate enough for other things. You think she'd... I don't know what she'd do. That's the problem. Cole started toward the barn. Lynn, take the evening off. You look like you're about to fall over. She wanted to protest, but her body betrayed her. A wave of exhaustion so strong she had to grab the wagon to keep from swaying. May caught her elbow. Come on, you're going to bed. Lin Yu let herself be led inside and upstairs. May helped her out of her boots and coat, then pushed her toward the bed. Sleep, May ordered. I'll wake you for dinner. But Lin Yu didn't wake up for dinner. She woke up sometime in the deep night, confused and disoriented, her body aching like she'd been beaten. The room was dark except for moonlight coming through the window, and she knew, with absolute certainty, what had woken her. The pain was familiar. She'd felt it before, years ago, when she'd lost the baby that Robert's family pretended never existed. The cramping, the wrongness low in her belly. Except there was no baby this time. There was nothing. Just her body remembering trauma, replaying it like a nightmare made physical. Lin Yu stumbled out of bed toward the wash basin, her hands shaking so badly she could barely pour water. She splashed her face, trying to ground herself in the present. This wasn't then. She wasn't pregnant. The baby was already gone, had been gone for 3 years. But her body didn't care about logic. It remembered pain and loss and being alone. A knock at the door made her jump. Lynn? Cole's voice, quiet. You all right? Heard you moving around. She couldn't answer. Couldn't make her voice work past the tightness in her throat. The door opened. She must have forgotten to lock it. And Cole stood there in the dim light, fully dressed despite the late hour. He took one look at her face and stepped inside, closing the door behind him. What's wrong? Nothing. I'm fine. You're not fine. You're white as a sheet and shaking. He moved closer, slow and careful, like approaching a spooked horse. Talk to me. I can't. The words came out broken. I can't talk about it. Then don't talk. Just sit down before you fall down. He guided her to the bed and sat beside her, not touching but close enough that she could feel his presence, solid and real. They sat in silence for a long time. Outside, an owl called. Inside, Lin Yu tried to remember how to breathe. I lost a baby, she said finally, the words coming from somewhere deep and painful. 3 years ago. Robert's baby. I was pregnant when he died. Cole went very still. His mother said it was my fault. Said I killed him with the stress of it, with my foreign blood. Said the baby was cursed anyway, better off not being born. Lin Yu's hands twisted in her lap. I lost it 2 months after Robert's funeral, alone in my room. Nobody came. Nobody cared. That's why Margaret called you Barren. I'm not barren. I just couldn't... Her voice broke. I couldn't keep it. Couldn't protect it. And they blame me for that too. Cole was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rougher than usual. My wife died in childbirth. Long time ago, down in Texas. Baby too. I wasn't there. Was away working a cattle drive, trying to earn money for a bigger house, better life. Came home to two graves and a world that didn't make sense anymore.
Lin Yue looked at him, seeing the old pain written in the lines of his face.
People told me it wasn't my fault, Cole continued. Said these things happen, said I couldn't have known, said lots of comforting lies. But the truth is, I chose work over being there, chose money over presence, and they died alone because of it. He stared at his hands. So I understand guilt, understand blaming yourself for things you couldn't control. How did you survive it?
Didn't for a while. Drank myself halfway to death, picked fights with anyone who looked at me wrong, finally sobered up enough to realize I had a choice. Die slow or find something worth living for. Chose the second option. Barely. They sat together in the darkness. Two broken people holding space for each other's pain. Lin Yue felt something shift in her chest. Not healing exactly, but maybe the beginning of it. The recognition that she wasn't alone in carrying impossible weight. Margaret was wrong, Cole said, about the baby being cursed, about it being your fault, about you being useless. She was wrong about all of it. How do you know? Because I've seen you work, seen you stand up to Garvey and the judge, and Margaret herself. Seen you learn to ride and shoot, and build a life out of nothing. He looked at her directly. Whatever else you are, Lin Yue, you ain't useless. And anyone who made you feel that way was lying. The words hit her like a physical blow. Not because they hurt, but because they were the exact opposite of everything she'd been told for years. Because someone was finally saying she had value beyond what she could produce or provide. Thank you, she whispered. Cole stood up. Get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be hard. They always are after a night like this. But you'll get through it. You're stronger than you think. He left, closing the door quietly behind him. Lin Yue lay back down, exhausted but somehow lighter. The pain was still there, would probably always be there, in some form, but it felt more manageable now. Shared. She fell asleep thinking about Cole's wife and baby, about May's violent husband, about all the ways people survived impossible things, about the quiet strength it took to keep going when the world tried to break you. And somewhere in that darkness, she found something that felt almost like peace. The morning after Lin Yu's confession came quiet and cold, the kind of stillness that settles over a place after secrets have been told. She woke feeling hollowed out but somehow cleaner, like lancing an infected wound. Cole had listened without judgment. May had left healing tea by her door, and the world kept turning despite everything she'd revealed. Work became her anchor in the weeks that followed. She threw herself into it with a fierceness that surprised even May, rising before dawn to help with breakfast, spending afternoons learning to handle cattle with Danny, staying up late to mend harnesses and clothes by lamplight. If she kept moving, kept her hands busy, the ghost couldn't catch up to her. You're going to work yourself to death, May said one morning, finding Lin Yue already elbow-deep in bread dough at 4:30. That what you're trying to do? I'm trying to earn my keep. You earned that twice over already. This ain't about earning nothing. This is about running. May pulled up a chair and sat down heavily. I did the same thing after I left my husband. Worked myself raw trying to outrun what happened. Took me 2 years to figure out you can't outrun your own head. Lin Yue kept kneading, her hands working the dough with mechanical precision. Then what do? You stop running. You turn around and look at it. You let it be part of you instead of the only thing you are. May's voice was gentler than usual. What Cole told you the other night about his wife and baby. He don't talk about that with people. Maybe never talked about it with anyone before you. You know what that means? That he trusts me? That he sees something in you worth being honest with, worth being vulnerable around. May stood up and dusted flour off her hands. You're part of this place now, Lin, not just working here, part of it. Sooner you accept that, sooner you can stop trying so hard to prove you deserve it. The words stuck with Lin Yue throughout the day, part of this place. When had that happened? When had this ranch stopped being a temporary refuge and started feeling like something close to home? She was still thinking about it that afternoon when Cole found her in the barn, teaching herself to braid leather reins that had frayed beyond simple mending. Got something for you, he said, holding out a folded piece of paper. Invitation to the Stockmen's Association Winter Gala, biggest social event of the season,
Happens every year in February. Usually just rich folks and ranch owners showing off, but this year they're doing something different. Lin Yu took the paper and unfolded it. The invitation was printed on expensive cardstock, gilt-edged and formal. Her eyes caught on one line near the bottom. All members are encouraged to bring their household staff to participate in this year's community address session. She looked up at Cole. What's a community address session? New thing they're trying. Letting regular folks, workers, hired hands, even Chinese laborers from the railroad, get up and speak about conditions in the territory. Supposed to help the big ranchers understand what people actually need. Cole leaned against the barn wall. Of course, most of them won't listen, but it's something. And you want me to go? I want you to have the option. If you want to speak, I'll make sure you get the chance. If you want to stay here where it's safe, that's fine too. His gray eyes were steady on hers. But I think you got things worth saying. Things people need to hear, whether they want to or not. Lin Yue's stomach twisted. Cole, I can't get up in front of all those people. Why not? Because they hate me. Because I'm everything they look down on, foreign and poor, and what? Scared? Cole's voice wasn't unkind. Everyone's scared when they tell truth to power. But you already stood up to Garvey and Margaret and a territorial judge. This ain't so different. This is completely different. This is walking into a room full of people like Margaret and asking them to see me as human. Yeah. Cole pushed off the wall. That's exactly what it is. And maybe they won't. Probably most of them won't. But some will. And that's how change happens. One person at a time, one mind at a time, until enough people see truth that the liars can't shout loud enough to drown it out anymore. He left her holding the invitation, her hand shaking slightly. Lin Yue looked down at the fancy script, the careful words designed to make this gathering sound civilized and progressive. A community address session, like putting a fancy name on something made it less terrifying. That night at dinner, May brought it up in front of the whole table. So who's going to this gala nonsense, she asked, serving stew with her usual efficiency. Cole's going, obviously. Anyone else fool enough to put on fancy clothes and pretend to be civilized? Danny raised his hand. I'll go if there's free food. There's always free food at these things, Frank said. That's the whole point. Rich people showing off how much they can waste. I'm going, May announced. Someone's got to keep Cole from starting a fist fight with the Cattlemen's Association president. Again. That was one time, Cole muttered. And he deserved it. He called you a half-breed sympathizer. You broke his nose. Like I said, deserved it. The table laughed, the tension breaking. Lin Yue picked at her stew, only half listening to the banter around her. Her mind was still on that invitation, on the idea of standing up in front of people who thought she was less than human and demanding they see her anyway. You thinking about it? Danny asked her quietly. The speaking thing? I don't know. Maybe. I think you should do it. He kept his voice low enough that only she could hear. I grew up in town, before I came to work here. I saw how people treated you and others like you. Chinese workers, Mexican families. Anyone who wasn't white enough or rich enough or connected enough. Nobody ever called it out. Nobody ever said it was wrong. Maybe if someone does, things could change. Or maybe they'll just hate me more. Maybe. But you ever notice how the people who hate you most are the ones scared of what you represent? You're living proof that their whole system is garbage, that a woman they sold off like property can survive without them, thrive without them. That's terrifying to folks who built their whole identity on being better than you. Lin Yu looked at him, this 20-year-old kid who somehow understood things that took most people a lifetime to figure out. When'd you get so smart? I ain't smart, just got eyes. He grinned. But seriously, you should do it. I'll be there. May will be there. Cole will definitely be there, probably armed. You won't be alone. Over the next 2 weeks, the idea grew from a possibility to something closer to a decision. Lin Yue started writing things down. Observations about how she'd been treated, things she wished she could say to Margaret and people like her. The words came out rough and angry at first, then slowly shaped themselves into something more coherent. May found her one night hunched over the kitchen table, papers spread everywhere, crossing out and rewriting for the 100th time. Let me see, May said, sitting down across from her. Lin Yue handed over the pages reluctantly, watched May's face as she read, looking for judgment or criticism, or that particular kind of pity that made her want to disappear. Instead,
May's expression went hard and angry in a way that had nothing to do with Lin Yue. "This," May said, tapping the papers, "this is truth. Raw and uncomfortable and exactly what those bastards need to hear. It's too much, too angry."
It's not enough angry. You're still being polite, still cushioning the blows. Stop trying to make them comfortable. They didn't worry about your comfort when they were selling you. If I'm too harsh, they won't listen. They're not going to listen anyway. Most of them decided what they think about you before you ever walked into that hall. So you might as well say what needs saying instead of wasting energy on diplomacy. May pushed the papers back across the table. Write what you feel. Write what's true. Let them deal with their own discomfort for once. So Lin Yue rewrote it, stripped away the careful phrasing and the softening words and the apologies for taking up space. Wrote about being sold, about being called useless and barren, and worse, about watching people she'd served and worked for treat her like she was less than the horses in their stables. When she finished, the words on the page looked brutal, unforgiving. True. She showed it to Cole 2 days before the gala. He read it in silence, standing by the barn while horses shuffled in their stalls around them. When he looked up, his expression was complicated. Pride and anger, and something that might have been grief. "You sure you want to say this out loud?" he asked. "In front of all those people?" "No, but I'm going to do it anyway." "Good." He folded the papers carefully and handed them back. "One piece of advice, though. When you get up there, don't read from this. You wrote it down to organize your thoughts, but when you speak, look at them. Make them see you. Words on a page are easy to dismiss. A woman looking you in the eye while she tells you how you failed her, that's harder to ignore." The night of the gala arrived cold and clear. Lin Yue dressed in the one good outfit May had helped her put together, a dark blue dress that was simple but well made, her hair pulled back in a style that was neat without being fancy. She looked at herself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. Composed, determined, almost confident. May knocked and entered without waiting for permission. "You ready?" "No." "Good. Only fools are ready for something like this." May adjusted Lin Yu's collar with practiced hands. "Remember, you're not asking for their approval. You're telling them truth. Big difference." The gala was held in the same building as the winter gathering where this whole thing started. Walking through those doors again felt like stepping backward through time. Lin Yu half expected to see Thomas Garvey lurching toward her, Margaret watching with calculation in her eyes. Instead, she saw a room transformed. The usual social divisions were still there. Rich folks clustered on one side, workers and staff on the other. But someone had set up a raised platform at the front with chairs for speakers. A podium stood in the center, plain wood but official looking. Margaret was there, of course, holding court near the refreshment table, surrounded by other wealthy matrons who hung on her every word. She saw Lin Yue, and her face went rigid with fury. Lin Yue met her eyes and didn't look away. Didn't flinch, just held the gaze until Margaret turned back to her friends, her posture stiff with rage. "That's my girl," May murmured. "Never let them see you scared." Cole appeared at Lin Yu's elbow, cleaned up in what passed for his formal wear, black suit that actually fit, hair combed back, boots polished. He looked deeply uncomfortable but determined. "Association president's already trying to control who gets to speak," he said quietly. "Wants to approve all the addresses beforehand. Make sure nobody says anything too controversial. I told him that defeats the whole purpose. He told me to mind my business. We came to an agreement." "What kind of agreement?" "The kind where he lets anyone speak who wants to, and I don't make a scene about how the whole thing's rigged." Cole's mouth twitched. He ain't happy about it, but he knows better than to push me in public. The evening began with dinner, elaborate and wasteful, exactly like May had predicted. Lin Yue barely touched her food, too nervous to eat. Around her, conversations flowed about cattle prices and railroad expansion and territorial politics. Nobody talked to her directly, but she caught plenty of sidelong glances and whispered comments. Finally, after what felt like hours, the association president stood up and called for attention. "Ladies and gentlemen, we come now to the community address portion of our evening. As you know, this is a new initiative designed to foster better understanding between all levels of our territorial society." He said it like he was doing everyone a favor. "We'll hear from several speakers tonight. I ask that you listen respectfully and save questions for the end." The first speaker was a railroad worker who talked about safety conditions and wages. He was articulate and careful, making good points without being threatening. The crowd listened politely and applauded when he finished. The second was a woman from one of the mining camps speaking about the need for better medical care in remote areas. Also good, also safe, also unlikely to change anything.
Lin Yu felt her courage starting to slip. These were important issues spoken by brave people, but they were the kind of things the wealthy could nod along with and then ignore. Worthy causes that didn't challenge the fundamental order of things. She wasn't planning to be polite. When the third speaker finished, the president looked uncomfortable. "I believe we have time for one more. I'll go." Lin Yu stood up before she could change her mind. The room went completely silent. Even the servers stopped moving. Every eye turned toward her, some curious, some hostile, most just shocked that the Chinese widow had the audacity to speak at all. She walked to the platform on legs that felt disconnected from her body, climbed the steps, stood behind the podium looking out at a sea of faces that had already judged her and found her wanting. For a moment, she couldn't breathe, couldn't remember a single word she'd planned to say. The papers in her pocket might as well have been written in a foreign language. Then she saw Cole, standing in the back, arms crossed, watching her with absolute certainty that she could do this. Beside him, May with that fierce protective expression she wore when she was proud of someone. Danny grinning like she'd already won. Lin Yue took a breath, left the papers in her pocket, and spoke. "My name is Lin Yu. Some of you know me as the Chinese widow, Margaret Chen's useless daughter-in-law, the woman Thomas Garvey tried to buy at the winter gathering 2 months ago." Sharp intakes of breath around the room. Margaret's face went white, then red. The president looked like he wanted to stop her but couldn't figure out how. "I'm here because I was told this is a place where anyone can speak truth about conditions in the territory. So here's my truth. This society treats some people like they're disposable, like they're things to be bought and sold and thrown away when they're no longer useful. Now see here," someone started, but Cole's voice cut through. "Let her finish." The speaker subsided. Lin Yue kept going. "When my husband died, his mother decided I had no value because I couldn't give her grandchildren. Never mind that I'd worked in her house for 3 years without pay. Never mind that I'd lost a child, her grandchild, and grieved alone because admitting it would have embarrassed the family. None of that mattered. I was barren, therefore useless, therefore disposable." Margaret stood up. "This is slander. It's truth." Lin Yu's voice didn't waver. "You sold me to Thomas Garvey for $150 to settle a debt. You did it in front of half this room. If anyone here wants to contradict that, please do." Silence. Nobody contradicted. They'd all seen it happen, even if they pretended not to remember. "So I'm standing here as someone who was bought and sold like property in a territory that supposedly outlawed that practice decades ago. And I'm asking all of you, when you call yourselves civilized, when you talk about law and order and proper society, what exactly do you mean? Because from where I'm standing, civilization looks a lot like wealthy people doing whatever they want and pretending it's justice." The room erupted. People shouting objections, demanding she be removed, some few actually trying to defend what she was saying. The association president was hammering for order, his face purple with rage or embarrassment, or both. Lin Yue waited for the noise to die down. When it didn't, when it just got louder and angrier, she did something she'd never done before in a room full of white people. She raised her voice and spoke over them. "I'm not finished." The sheer audacity of it shocked them into silence. "You want to know what I've learned working at Cole Draven's ranch? I've learned that respect isn't about bloodlines or skin color or how much money your family has. It's about treating people like they're human, paying them for their work, letting them make choices about their own lives. Basic things that should be common decency, but apparently need to be spelled out." She looked directly at Margaret. "I've learned that being called useless by people who never valued you in the first place says more about them than it does about you." Then she turned to the broader crowd. "And I've learned that most of you would rather maintain a system that benefits you than admit that system is rotten. Would rather blame victims for their circumstances than question how those circumstances came to be. Would rather sell a widow to settle a debt than examine why anyone thought that was acceptable in the first place." "This is outrageous," the president started. "It is outrageous," Lin Yu agreed. "It's outrageous that we're having this conversation at all. It's outrageous that I have to stand here and explain why being sold like livestock is wrong.
It's outrageous that the only reason I'm not still trapped in that situation is because one man with enough money and reputation decided to intervene."
She paused, letting that sink in. How many others didn't get that intervention? How many people right now are being exploited and abused and treated as disposable because they don't have someone powerful enough to protect them? That's what your civilized society actually looks like. And if you're not uncomfortable hearing that, you're not paying attention.
The silence that followed was absolute. Lin Yue could hear her own heartbeat, loud and fast, could feel hundreds of eyes on her, some shocked, some furious, some, surprisingly, thoughtful. Then, from the back of the room, a sound. Slow, deliberate applause. Cole Draven, clapping with measured precision, his scarred face completely neutral, making it clear that he stood with every word she'd said. For a long moment, he was the only one. Then May joined in, her applause sharp and defiant. Then Danny. Then, one by one, other workers around the room, people who'd been treated as lesser, who'd watched injustice happen and stayed silent because speaking up meant losing everything. They applauded not because what Lin Yu said was comfortable, but because it was true. Some of the wealthy joined in too, not many, but enough to matter. People who'd been uncomfortable with how things worked but never knew how to say it. Who needed someone braver than them to speak first. Margaret didn't applaud. Neither did Thomas Garvey, sitting in the corner with murder in his eyes. Neither did most of the old money families who'd built their fortunes on the backs of people they considered inferior. But enough did. Enough that the sound filled the room and made it impossible to pretend this hadn't happened. Lin Yu stepped away from the podium on shaking legs, made it down the stairs and halfway across the room before her knees threatened to give out. Cole appeared at her side, steadying her with a hand on her elbow. "You good?" he asked quietly. "I think I'm going to throw up." "Outside. Now."
He steered her through the crowd and out a side door into the winter night. The cold air hit her face like a blessing. Lin Yue bent over, hands on her knees, trying to breathe through the adrenaline crash. "Did I just make everything worse?" she asked when she could speak again.
"You just told a room full of powerful people that their system is broken and they're complicit in it, so yeah, you probably made some things worse." Cole leaned against the wall beside her. "But you also gave voice to things that needed saying, made it harder for them to pretend everything's fine. That's worth something. Margaret's going to destroy me for this. She was already trying to destroy you. Now she just has to do it louder." He looked at her. "You regret it? What you said in there?" Lin Yue thought about it, about the fury on Margaret's face, the shock in the crowd, the feeling of finally being heard instead of spoken over. "No," she said, "I don't regret it." "Good. Because that was the bravest thing I've seen in a long time. And I've seen some brave things." May found them a few minutes later, her face flushed with triumph. "Lin Yue, you absolute terror. Do you know what you just did? Committed social suicide? You gave Margaret Chen and everyone like her the public calling out they've needed for years. Half the room is scandalized. Quarter of them are furious, and the rest are actually thinking about what you said." May grinned. "Also, Judge Harrison specifically asked me to tell you that was the most legally accurate description of human trafficking he's heard at a social function. He seemed impressed. Or he's gathering evidence to arrest Margaret," Cole said. "Either way, not our problem." They stood together in the cold, three people who'd all survived being broken by systems designed to crush them. Inside, the gala continued, probably people arguing about what Lin Yue had said, or trying to pretend it didn't happen, or plotting revenge. Out here, none of that mattered. "We should go home," May said finally, "before someone works up the courage to come out here and tell us we're not welcome anymore." "We were never welcome," Lin Yue said. "True. But now we're not welcome, and we made them uncomfortable. That's an upgrade." The ride back to the ranch was quiet. Lin Yu sat in the wagon between May and Cole, watching the stars wheel overhead, thinking about what she'd done, about the faces in that crowd, some angry, some sympathetic, some just confused, about Margaret's rage and Garvey's hatred and the way Cole had applauded first, making it safe for others to follow. When they got home, May went straight to bed, exhausted from the emotional weight of the evening. Danny and the other hands who'd attended gathered in the kitchen, reliving the best moments and laughing about the president's purple face. Cole found Lin Yue on the porch, wrapped in a blanket, staring out at the dark pastures. "Can't sleep?" he asked. "Too wound up." He sat down beside her, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. For a while they didn't talk, just sat in companionable silence while the ranch settled down for the night. "My wife was Chinese," Cole said finally. "I don't talk about that much. People assume she was white because I am, because that's what they're comfortable assuming. But she was from San Francisco, came to Texas with her family when the railroad work dried up. That's how we met." Lin Yu turned to look at him. "I didn't know." "Nobody does. After she died, I let people believe what they wanted. Seemed easier than fighting about it. But watching you up there tonight, refusing to let them ignore you, refusing to make yourself smaller for their comfort." He paused. "It reminded me that easy ain't always right." "Is that why you helped me? Because of her?" "Partly. Mostly because you needed help and I could give it. But yeah, seeing you in that hall being sold off like property, it brought back memories of watching her family struggle, watching people treat them like they were less than human. I couldn't help her. She's gone. But I could help you." He looked at her directly. "No regrets about that either." "Cole, I know what May said to you about us dancing around something. She ain't wrong." His voice was steady, matter of fact. "But I also know you didn't come here looking for that. You came here looking for safety and work and a chance to build something on your own terms. So that's what I'm offering. Nothing more unless you want it. Nothing less no matter what." Lin Yu's heart was beating too fast. "What if I don't know what I want? Then you take your time figuring it out. I ain't going anywhere." He stood up. "Get some sleep, Lin. Tomorrow's going to be interesting. People don't forget speeches like that." He left her alone on the porch, wrapped in blankets and confusion and something that felt dangerously close to hope. Inside, the ranch was quiet. Above, the stars watched like they'd watched for thousands of years, indifferent to human drama, but somehow comforting in their permanence. Lin Yu thought about Cole's wife, about May's husband, about all the ways people survived loss and kept going anyway. Thought about the speech she'd given and the bridge she'd burned and the uncertain future that stretched ahead. She'd stood in front of her enemies and refused to be silent, had claimed her voice and her story and her right to exist without apology. It wasn't everything, but it was a start. The backlash came fast and vicious. 2 days after the gala, someone painted slurs across the ranch gate in red paint that looked too much like blood. May found it first, standing in the pre-dawn darkness, staring at words designed to wound and intimidate. She didn't wake Lin Yue, just got a bucket and brush and scrubbed it clean before breakfast. Her jaw set in a hard line that meant someone was going to regret this eventually. But Lin Yu found out anyway. Danny let it slip over morning coffee, forgetting that May had wanted to keep it quiet. "It's fine," May said when Lin Yue confronted her. "Just cowards being cowards. Nothing we can't handle. They're targeting you because of me. They're targeting us because we made them look in a mirror and they didn't like what they saw. That's on them, not you." The threats escalated. Anonymous letters arrived warning Cole to get rid of the Chinese woman before something bad happens. Suppliers in town suddenly couldn't fill orders, or claimed shipments were delayed, or just flat refused to do business with the ranch. Judge Harrison sent word through May that Margaret was quietly organizing a boycott, using her social connections to strangle the ranch's access to goods and services. "She's trying to starve us out," Cole said at dinner one night, his voice flat. "Make it too expensive to keep operating until we're forced to sell." "Is it working?" Frank asked. "Not yet, but it could if this keeps up." Cole looked at Lin Yue across the table. "I want you to know, if you want to leave, I'll arrange safe passage. Get you to California, maybe, somewhere Margaret's reach don't extend. No judgment. You said your piece, made your stand. Nobody can ask more than that." Lin Yu set down her fork carefully. "Is that what you want? Me to leave? What I want don't matter. This is your choice. Everything's been my choice since I came here. That's the whole point." She met his eyes. "I'm not leaving. They want me gone. They're going to have to do better than paint and threatening letters." May grinned. "That's my girl." But the pressure kept building. 3 of the ranch hands quit, spooked by the threats or offered better money elsewhere. The bank that held the mortgage on some of Cole's land suddenly called for early payment, citing vague concerns about business stability. Even the railroad crews that usually bought Cole's beef started looking at other suppliers.
They're closing ranks, Cole said, studying the ledgers by lamplight, making it clear that anyone who does business with us is next. Lin Yu watched him work, seeing the stress in the tight set of his shoulders, the way his jaw clenched when the numbers didn't add up right. He'd taken a stand for her, and now it was costing him everything he'd built. "I should go," she said quietly. "This isn't sustainable." Cole didn't look up from the ledgers. "We've had this conversation. That was before you were losing the ranch. I'm not losing anything I'm not willing to lose." He finally met her eyes. "You think Margaret's the first person who tried to ruin me? I've survived droughts and cattle disease and economic crashes. I'll survive her too." "But why? Why risk everything for Iku? For what? For you?" Cole's voice was sharp. "Because some things matter more than money. Because I watched my wife die alone, and I swore I'd never stand by and let someone else suffer if I could stop it. Because you're worth fighting for, even if you don't believe it yet." The words hung in the air between them. Lin Yu felt something crack in her chest, something that had been locked tight since Robert died, since Margaret called her useless, since she'd learned that the world measured her worth in children she couldn't produce and approval she couldn't earn. "I don't know how to," she started, then stopped, not sure how to finish. "You don't have to know anything right now. Just don't leave. That's all I'm asking." So she stayed. Through the boycotts and the threats and the slowly dwindling supplies. She worked harder than ever, finding ways to make food stretch, mending clothes until they couldn't be mended anymore, helping Danny and the remaining hands keep the ranch running on minimal resources. And slowly, quietly, something started to shift. It began with a Chinese family from the railroad camp showing up one morning with vegetables to sell. The father spoke halting English, explaining that they'd heard about Lin Yu's speech, about the ranch that employed a Chinese woman and treated her like an equal. They wanted to support that, even if it meant risking Margaret's displeasure. "We grow good vegetables," the father said, gesturing to his cart. "Fair price. No trouble." Cole bought everything they had and asked them to come back next week. Then a Mexican ranch hand who'd worked for Cole years ago showed up looking for work, saying he'd heard Cole needed help and didn't care what people said about him. "People who talk the most usually do the least," the man said. His name was Javier. "I'd rather work for someone with spine than someone with money." More followed. Slowly at first, then faster. People Margaret had never noticed, immigrants and workers and anyone who'd felt the weight of that system Lin Yue had called out. They came offering goods, services, labor, not because they could afford to lose Margaret's goodwill, but because they couldn't afford to lose the hope that things might actually change. "You're building something," May said one morning, watching a group of Chinese workers help repair a barn wall in exchange for beef and wages. "A community outside the one that rejected you. That's dangerous." Dangerous how? Because it proves you don't need them. People like Margaret, they can handle being hated. What they can't handle is being irrelevant. May's smile was sharp. "You just made them irrelevant." The spring thaw came early that year, turning the snow to mud and the frozen ground to workable soil. Lin Yu spent her mornings in the garden May had helped her start, planting vegetables with seeds traded from the Chinese families who came through. Her hands in the dirt felt right somehow, connected to something older than Montana Territory's social hierarchies. Cole found her there one afternoon, kneeling in the mud with dirt under her fingernails and satisfaction on her face. "Got news," he said. "Judge Harrison just ruled that Margaret violated territorial trafficking laws. She's being fined and put on probation. Won't go to jail, but her reputation's pretty well destroyed." Lin Yu sat back on her heels. "How do you feel about that?" "Me? I feel like justice is slow and incomplete and doesn't fix what got broken. But it's something." He crouched down beside her. "The judge also made it clear that any future attempts to interfere with your freedom would be prosecuted as kidnapping. You're officially under territorial protection now." "So I'm safe." "Safe as anyone is in this territory. Which ain't saying much, but it's better than it was." They worked in silence for a while, Cole helping her plant without being asked, his big scarred hand surprisingly gentle with the fragile seedlings. "May says I'm building a community," Lin Yui said finally, "that I'm making Margaret irrelevant by proving we don't need her approval. May's usually right about these things." "Is that what you wanted when you brought me here?" Cole was quiet for a long moment, considering.
I wanted to stop something wrong from happening. Everything after that, the speech, the community, you standing up and refusing to be erased, that was all you. I just gave you a place to do it. It was more than that. You gave me permission to be angry, to fight back, to stop apologizing for existing. Lin Yu looked at him. Nobody ever did that before. Then they were fools. The words were simple, matter of fact, but they landed like a blow. Lin Yu felt her throat tighten with emotions she couldn't name. Cole stood up, brushing dirt off his knees. I'm heading into town. Need anything? Just... Lin Yu hesitated. Be careful. Margaret might be legally restrained, but that doesn't mean she's given up. I'm always careful. He paused. You worry about me? Someone has to. You're terrible at worrying about yourself. His mouth twitched in what might have been a smile. Yeah, guess I am. He left her in the garden with dirt on her hands and hope taking root in her chest like the seeds she'd planted. Fragile still, easily damaged, but growing. The next crisis came from an unexpected direction. Thomas Garvey showed up drunk at the ranch 3 weeks later, riding alone this time without his gang of supporters. Danny spotted him first and came running to find Cole. Boss, we got a problem. Cole was in the barn, checking on a mare about to foal. He didn't even look up. What kind? Garvey. Drunk and asking for you. Should I send him away? No, I'll handle it. Cole handed Danny the halter he'd been adjusting. Keep an eye on the mare. She's close. He walked out to meet Garvey in the yard, Lin Yu following despite his warning look. She'd hidden during the last confrontation. Not this time. Garvey looked terrible, clothes dirty, face unshaven, eyes red from drink and something else. Grief, maybe. Or rage so old it had curdled into despair. Draven, he slurred, need to talk. So talk. Not here. Private. Garvey's eyes slid to Lin Yu and away, like looking at her hurt. Man to man. Anything you got to say, you can say in front of her. She's the one you tried to buy. Seems fair she hears it. Garvey swayed in his saddle. For a moment, Lin Yu thought he might fall off. Then he straightened with visible effort. You ruined me, he said. My credit's gone, my reputation's destroyed. Nobody'll do business with me. All because of her. He said it without heat, just stating facts. No, Cole said. All because you thought you could buy a person. That's on you. I needed... Garvey stopped, struggling with words. I needed someone. My wife died last year. House is empty. Just wanted someone to keep it running, someone who wouldn't ask for much. Thought a Chinese widow, someone grateful for the chance. Someone you could control, Cole interrupted. Someone desperate enough to accept whatever you offered. That's not wanting help, Garvey. That's wanting property. I would have treated her decent. Given her food, shelter, protection. Protection from what? From men like you? Lin Yu's voice was cold. I've had enough of people offering me protection in exchange for my freedom. It's not protection, it's just a different kind of prison. Garvey finally looked at her directly. You think you're better off here? Working yourself to death for a man who took you in out of pride just to prove he could? I think I'm free here. That's better than anything you were offering. Free? Garvey laughed, bitter and harsh. You're not free. You're just owned by someone who's better at hiding it. Cole moved so fast, Lin Yu barely saw it. One moment he was standing relaxed, the next his hand was on Garvey's reins, yanking the horse close enough that Garvey had to grab the saddle to keep from falling. Listen careful, Cole said, his voice deadly quiet. Lin works here because she chooses to. She leaves when she wants to. She gets paid fair wages and treated with respect. That's not ownership, that's employment. The fact you can't tell the difference is why you're alone in that empty house, drinking yourself to death. He released the reins and stepped back. Now get off my land before I decide you're trespassing. Garvey stared at him for a long moment. Then his shoulders sagged. All the fight went out of him at once, leaving just a broken man on a tired horse. She made a fool of me, he said quietly, at that gala, standing up there calling out Margaret and everyone else. Made me look like a villain. You made yourself a villain when you tried to buy her. Lin just gave it a name. Garvey turned his horse without another word and rode away, his back bent like he was carrying weight too heavy to stand upright anymore. They watched until he disappeared over the ridge. He's going to hurt himself, Lin Yue said. Probably. Cole's voice was flat. But that's his choice, same as everything else. You don't feel bad for him? Even a little? I feel bad that the world made men like him think they're entitled to own people. But feeling bad don't mean excusing it. He looked at her. You feel bad for him? Lin Yu thought about it. About Garvey's drunk eyes and grabbing hands. About his claim that he would have treated her decent while planning to own her. About the empty house and dead wife and loneliness that made him think buying another person was acceptable. No, she said finally. I feel bad that his wife died, but not for him. He had choices. He made bad ones. That's not my responsibility to fix. Cole nodded slowly. You're learning. Learning what? That you can acknowledge someone's pain without taking it on yourself. That compassion don't mean carrying everyone else's weight. He started walking back toward the barn. Come on. That mare's about to foal, and I want you to see it. The birth was messy and difficult and beautiful in the way hard things are when they end well. Lin Yue watched the foal struggle to stand on wobbly legs, watched the mare nuzzle it with fierce protective tenderness, and felt something inside her chest unlock. She'd lost a child, would carry that grief forever. But maybe, possibly, there was more to her story than that loss. Maybe she could be more than the woman who failed to give Robert's family an heir. Maybe she already was. Summer came to Montana Territory in waves of heat that made the winter seem like a distant dream. The ranch thrived despite Margaret's efforts to destroy it. The community Lin Yu had accidentally built grew stronger. Chinese families, Mexican workers, anyone who'd been pushed to the margins found their way to Cole's place and found acceptance there. May watched it all with satisfaction. You built a whole different world out here, she said one evening, watching families gather for a shared meal in the yard. Right under Margaret's nose. We built it, Lin Yue corrected. All of us. You started it, that speech, standing up there and saying the quiet parts loud. That gave other people permission to do the same. Lin Yu looked around at the people laughing and eating and sharing stories in multiple languages. Children playing in the dirt without worrying about propriety. Women and men working side by side without rigid social hierarchies dictating who could do what. It wasn't perfect. There were still arguments and misunderstandings and the kind of friction that comes from bringing different people together. But it was real, built on mutual respect instead of fear, on cooperation instead of exploitation. Think it'll last? She asked May. Nothing lasts forever, but while it's here, it matters. That's enough. Cole found Lin Yu later that night, sitting on the porch and watching stars, like she'd done that first uncertain night months ago. So much had changed since then. She'd changed. Grown harder in some ways, softer in others. Learned to fight, and learned when fighting wasn't worth it. Can't sleep? He asked, settling into the chair beside hers. Thinking too much. About? Everything. Where I was. Where I am. How fast things can change when you stop accepting what other people say you deserve. Cole was quiet for a moment. You know what I see when I look at you now? What? Someone who figured out that survival ain't enough, that you can demand more than just not dying. That's rare. He leaned back in his chair. Most people, they survive and call it victory. You survived and then built something worth living for. That's different. I didn't do it alone. Nobody does anything alone. But you had the courage to start. He glanced at her. You planning to stay, long term? The question shouldn't have surprised her, but it did. Lin Yu realized she'd been living day to day, not thinking past the immediate future, always ready to run if things went bad, never quite letting herself believe this could be permanent. I don't know, she said honestly. This place, it's more home than anywhere else I've been since leaving China, but I'm still waiting for the other shoe to drop, for someone to tell me it was all temporary. I'm telling you now it's not temporary. You want to stay, you stay. You want to build a life here, build it. You want... He stopped, seeming to struggle with words. You want more than just work and wages. That's on the table too, if you're interested. Lin Yue's heart kicked hard against her ribs. Cole, I know what I said before, about nothing happening unless you wanted it. That still stands. But I also think you should know where I stand so you can make informed choices. He looked at her directly. I care about you, more than an employer should probably. And if you ever want to explore what that means, I'm willing. But if you don't,
We go on like we have been. Clear?
It was the most words she'd ever heard him string together at once. The most vulnerable she'd seen him since that night he told her about his wife and baby. "Can I think about it?" she asked. "Take all the time you need. I ain't going anywhere." But thinking about it was harder than Lin Yu expected, because the truth was, she cared about Cole too. Had cared about him since he stepped between her and Garvey at that winter gathering, maybe before. But caring about someone and building a life with them were different things. One required trust. The other required faith that the trust wouldn't be broken. She'd trusted Robert and his family. Look how that ended. May found her in the garden the next day, viciously weeding like the plants had personally offended her. "Cole talked to you?" May asked, sitting down on the fence. "How did you know?" "Because he's been walking around looking like he swallowed something painful and you're murdering weeds. Don't take a genius." May pulled out her pipe and lit it. "You gonna tell me what you're thinking, or should I guess?" "I don't know what I'm thinking. That's the problem." "Sure you do. You're thinking that caring about someone means giving them power to hurt you. Thinking that if you let yourself want something, the world will take it away just to prove you don't deserve nice things." May blew smoke into the clear summer air. "I'm right, aren't I?" Lin Yu didn't answer, which was answer enough. "Here's what I learned, living as long as I have," May continued. "You can't protect yourself from hurt by refusing to care. All that does is guarantee you'll be alone. Real protection comes from choosing people worth the risk. People who'll stand by you when things get hard instead of using your weakness against you." "How do you know Cole's that person?" "I don't. Nobody knows for certain, but I've watched him for 15 years now. Seen him lose everything and rebuild it. Seen him stand up for people when it cost him. Seen him keep his word even when breaking it would have been easier. That's not proof, but it's evidence." May looked at her. "Question ain't whether Cole's trustworthy. You already know he is. Question is whether you're brave enough to take the risk anyway." Lin Yu sat back on her heels, dirt on her hands, and truth settling in her chest. May was right. She was scared. Not of Cole hurting her intentionally, but of the world doing what it always did, taking away anything good she tried to hold on to. But living in fear of loss wasn't living. It was just another kind of prison. That night, Lin Yu found Cole in the barn checking on the horses before bed. He looked up when she entered, wariness in his eyes. "If I say yes," she said without preamble, "what does that look like? Specifically?" Cole set down the brush he'd been using. "Honestly, I don't know. Never done this before. Well, I did once, but that was 20 years ago in different circumstances." He leaned against the stall. "I figure we keep doing what we're doing, working together, living in the same house, building this place. But also we stop pretending there's nothing between us. We see where it goes. And if it goes nowhere, then it goes nowhere. We try, didn't work out, we stay friends and partners, life goes on." "You make it sound simple." "It is simple. We're the ones making it complicated." He moved closer. "Look, I ain't promising perfect. I'm difficult and set in my ways, and I got ghosts that come calling sometimes. You're stubborn and independent, and you've got your own damage. We'll fight, we'll disagree. Might not work at all. But I'd rather try and fail than spend the rest of my life wondering what if." Lin Yu looked at him, really looked at him, saw the scars and the gray eyes and the hands that knew how to gentle a horse and fire a gun with equal skill. Saw the man who'd defended her when he had nothing to gain, who'd given her space to grow instead of trying to control her, who'd stood beside her through boycotts and threats and social exile without once suggesting it was her fault. "Okay," she said. "Okay? Okay, let's try. See where it goes." Cole's face didn't change much, but something in his eyes softened. "You sure?" "No, but I'm doing it anyway." He smiled, a real smile, rare as Montana rain. "That's my girl." The kiss, when it came, was nothing like the dramatic gestures in the dime novels May sometimes read. It was careful and questioning and tasted like coffee and hope. Lin Yue felt Cole's hand cup her face with gentleness that contradicted every hard line of his body, felt her own arms wrap around him and hold on like maybe this time the world wouldn't tear away everything good. When they broke apart, Cole rested his forehead against hers. "This don't change anything about work or wages or you being free to leave, just so we're clear." "I know." "Good." He stepped back. Now get some sleep. We got cattle to move tomorrow, and I ain't doing it alone just because we're courting or whatever they call it. Lin Yue laughed, surprised by the sound. Courting? Is that what this is? Hell if I know. But it's something. It was something. Over the following months, that something grew into partnership that looked like love but felt more solid. They worked side by side during the day, sat together in the evenings while Cole read and Lin Yue mended or planned the garden. Sometimes they talked for hours. Sometimes they sat in comfortable silence. Sometimes they fought about stupid things like everyone does, then made up and moved on. It wasn't perfect. Cole was moody and withdrawn sometimes, disappearing into his own head where she couldn't follow. Lin Yue had nightmares about the baby she'd lost, and days where she couldn't stop being angry at a world that had tried to erase her. But they worked through it, learned each other's patterns and triggers, figured out how to give space when space was needed and closeness when closeness helped. May watched it all with approval. You two are actually making it work. Didn't think you had it in you. Didn't think I had what in me? Cole asked. The patience. You're not exactly known for being easy to live with. And yet you've lived with me for 15 years. I'm exceptional. Lin's just stubborn. Lin Yue laughed. She'd grown comfortable with May's blunt affection, learned to hear the love underneath the harsh words. The first anniversary of her speech at the gala came in February. Someone organized a gathering at the ranch. Not a fancy party, just people who'd been helped by the community they'd built. Chinese families and Mexican workers and anyone else who'd found refuge in this place that refused to follow the territory's unspoken rules about who belonged and who didn't. They stood in the yard as snow began to fall, sharing food and stories and warmth against the cold. Lin Yue looked around at faces she'd come to know, lives she'd touched by refusing to stay silent. You changed things, Danny said, appearing at her elbow with a cup of hot cider. Real, actual things. That's rare. I didn't do it alone. No, but you started it. That's what matters. Margaret Chen died that spring. Heart attack, sudden and final. Lin Yue heard about it from the postmaster when she went to town for supplies. She waited to feel something, triumph or grief or satisfaction. Instead, she felt nothing, just a vague sense that a chapter had closed. You all right? Cole asked when she told him. Yeah, I think I am. Lin Yue realized it was true. Margaret's death didn't change anything. The woman had already become irrelevant to Lin Yue's life. This just made it official. You want to go to the funeral? No, I said everything I needed to say while she was alive to hear it. Lin Yue looked at him. That's enough. 2 years after that first winter gathering, Cole proposed. Not with fancy words or grand gestures, just a simple question asked while they were mending fence in the spring mud. You want to make this legal? Get married proper? Lin Yue wiped sweat from her forehead. Why? Because I love you and I want the world to know it. Because if something happens to me, I want you to have legal claim to this place. Because... He stopped, looking uncharacteristically uncertain. Because I want to. If you do. I do, Lin Yue said, but I want it clear. I'm not changing my name. I'm not becoming someone's wife and losing myself in it. I'm Lin Yue. That's who I'll stay. Wouldn't want you any other way. They married in the ranch yard with May officiating, since she'd gotten herself ordained through some mail-order church just for the occasion. No fancy dresses or formal invitations, just the people who mattered, witnessing two broken people choosing to build something whole together. You may kiss your bride, May said, grinning. She ain't my bride. She's my partner, Cole said, then kissed Lin Yue anyway, to laughter and applause from the assembled crowd. That night, lying in bed in the room they now shared, Lin Yue thought about how far she'd come. From the woman being sold at a winter gathering to this, a landowner, a community builder, a person who'd claimed her voice and refused to let anyone take it away. You happy? Cole asked in the darkness. Yeah, Lin Yue said, surprised to find it was completely true. I am. Good, you deserve it. So do you. They fell asleep tangled together, two people who'd survived being broken and learned that survival was just the beginning, that you could demand more than just not dying, that you could build a life worth living even when the world tried to convince you that you didn't deserve one. 5 years later, Lin Yue stood in the same yard where she'd married Cole, watching children play while their parents worked or talked or rested in the shade.
The community had grown beyond anything she'd imagined that first uncertain night. They'd built a school, a small medical clinic, a trading post where people could exchange goods without going through town's merchants who still sometimes refused to serve them.
It wasn't paradise. There were still problems, prejudice and poverty, and all the ways humans hurt each other, intentionally or not. But it was theirs, built on the idea that everyone deserved dignity and choice and a fair chance to build something worth having. Cole appeared beside her, gray showing more prominently in his hair now, but his eyes still sharp. "You thinking about that night?" he asked. "At the Grand Hall?" "How did you know?" "Because I am too. Thinking about how close we came to never having this. If I'd stayed home that night, if I'd minded my own business, if you'd been too scared to take the risk." Lin Yue leaned into him, feeling solid and warm and permanent. "But you didn't, and I wasn't, and here we are." "Here we are," he agreed. May called them to dinner, her voice still strong despite her years, still commanding attention and respect. They walked hand in hand toward the house, toward the life they'd built from nothing, toward a future that belonged to them because they'd fought for it. The woman who'd been sold like property was gone. In her place stood someone stronger, someone who'd learned that your worth wasn't determined by what others said you deserved, but by what you claimed for yourself. Someone who'd turned pain into purpose, survival into defiance, silence into a voice that couldn't be ignored. Lin Yu had been the woman they tried to erase, but she'd become the woman who rewrote the rules, who built a community from the margins, who proved that you could survive being broken and come out the other side, not just whole, but better. She'd learned that freedom wasn't given. It was taken. That dignity wasn't granted by those in power. It was claimed by those brave enough to demand it. That love, real love, didn't require you to make yourself smaller. It made space for you to grow. And she'd learned that sometimes the bravest thing you could do was refuse to disappear, to stand up in front of people who wanted you silent and speak anyway, to build a life on your own terms, even when the world insisted you didn't deserve one. The legacy she left wasn't just the community she'd helped build or the speech that had started it all. It was the example she'd set, that one person refusing to accept injustice could create ripples that changed everything, that speaking truth to power mattered, even when it cost you, that you could rewrite your own story no matter how many people tried to write the ending for you. Lin Yue had been sold, discarded, and told she was worthless, but she'd become invaluable, not because someone else decided she had value, but because she decided it herself. And that, in the end, made all the difference. Years later, when people told the story of how Montana Territory changed, how its rigid social hierarchies started to crack and crumble, they often started with a winter gathering in 1883, with a Chinese widow standing on a platform, refusing to be silent, with a room full of powerful people forced to confront uncomfortable truths. But the real story wasn't about that one moment. It was about what came after, about the hard daily work of building something better, about choosing courage over comfort, community over approval, truth over the polite lies that kept broken systems running. It was about a woman who was told she was nothing and decided to become everything instead. Who learned that survival was just the beginning, and that a life worth living required fighting for it every single day. Lin Yue had fought, and won, not perfectly, not without cost, but completely. And in winning, she'd shown others it was possible, that you didn't have to accept the world as it was, that you could demand better, build better, be better. That was the real victory. Not just her own freedom, but the path she'd cleared for everyone who came after. The woman they tried to erase had become impossible to forget, and the world would never be quite the same.